growing up with Bruce in Hong Kong was very unique in a way that, as I guess most people know, Bruce was a very different type of person than an average guy, you know. He was a prankster, loved to play pranks at people, and every day he always had something new, so every day was very eventful. I remember the time when Bruce taught me the art of cha-cha. I was about, what, 8, 9 years old? Something like that. Anyway, Bruce at that point, you know, he knew he wanted to join this cha-cha contest, but he didn't want to be tied up with any one girl, you know, so when he shows up in a contest that people will say, hey, Bruce got a girlfriend, you know. So he said, well, but I still need a partner. So he said, okay, well, I guess I have to use my little brother here, you know. So, and he said, okay, I have to teach you how to dance in about a month, show you all the steps that we're going to be doing, work out a little routine, so we'll try to win it. I was always game, you know. I was young. I always liked entertainment. I said, okay, hey, something new, you know. So he was showing me like number 1, number 2, number 3. He had all those numbers lined up for those different routines that he does, right? So we got all worked out, and then we joined the contest, and lo and behold, we came number 1. We won. You know, there were a lot of articles and, you know, things saying that Bruce was a troublemaker when he was young. Well, actually, he wasn't really a troublemaker. What he was trying to do was actually try to cause a little commotion between, or interaction between two people, so so he could really practice up on his martial arts. Now, how he would do that was that he would go down to the street, dressed up in all traditional Chinese costume, per se. And even in the 50s, people would all dressed up in Western style clothes. And if you just walk out, you know, in all traditional Chinese, at his age, people will look at you. I mean, it's very obvious. I mean, you stand up like a sore thumb. So basically, he would go downstairs, dressed up like that. Any teenager or somebody that he considers, you know, he could challenge would approach him and have a stare at him, any type of stare. He would stop and say, what are you looking at? Do I look weird to you or something? Of course, some people will shy away and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, you know, and walk away. But there are some that say, hey, who do you think you are? Oh, he would always take that opportunity and say, okay. You know, a little fight will start, or a scuffle will start. And that's when Bruce learned how to do street fighting, because that's the only way he could get real experience from learning how to fight. But by doing so, I mean, you know, the police got to know, I mean, that, hey, this person in this high school was constantly picking fights, because they didn't know his motives. You know, they thought he was in a gang. They thought he was just out there picking fights. He was a ruffian, you know, that's what they thought. So finally, the police went to the school and got the headmaster of the school, called my mom, say, you know, and then the police, I remember it was a detective or somebody, talked to my mom, say, hey, either your son stop what he's doing, or we'll have to arrest him, because, you know, we can't let him just go out there and pick fights all day long, you know. Can't do that. So my mom, knowing Bruce, she knew that even if she talked to him, because he's that type of personality. He's got that thing, you know. I mean, so, and then at that point, my mom also thought that, I mean, hey, you know, he's American. He should go over there and further develop his studies. Change of environment will do him good. Before he left for the United States in 1959, he was sort of missing the family and myself, especially because at that point, I was sort of closest to him. And I remember I was about to go to sleep, and he came by my bedside, and he was telling me that, hey, Robert, I'll be leaving tomorrow. And he didn't say, I miss you and all that stuff, but I could see his emotion. I mean, you know, at that point. Very, very, the emotion was very, very deep inside, you know, and somehow, I mean, that love between us, I could feel it then, you know. The day that Bruce left for the States, well, the mood was very somber. Everybody was really kind of low. And Bruce, being as hyper and as up most of the time as he was during that day, he was very low too. I mean, I remember we walked him up to the boat, he got into the room. Actually, before then, he was just, at first, he was still putting up a little front, trying to be up, per se, to all of us, even though we were family. I mean, he would say, oh, look at this part of the boat, look at that part of the boat, see how great it was and all that. And finally, I mean, we all know that time for departure was getting real close, so took us to the room that, he was going to be staying in. And then Dad, Mom had to say goodbye. And I was real young then, I mean, but I was watching, and with Phoebe, and, we just said goodbye. I mean, we said, well, it's time. Actually, the announcement came on, saying that, those who aren't, passengers, please, leave the boat, we're about to depart. So anyway, we took off, and then we were still standing there by the pier, and then hoping that Bruce would show up, and he did. Up there somewhere, I remember he was throwing those rolls of tissue paper, and then he threw like 4 or 5 different ones, and I picked up one, and then of course I don't remember who else picked them up, but they were all picked up, and the boat started to depart. They were playing this song, Auld Lang Syne or something like that. As they were pulling out, and I remember the tissue paper was getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and finally they broke. It was very emotional. It was very emotional. I got off the plane, I walked out the plane door, and there he was, Bruce and Linda, and I don't recall, was Shannon there? Anyway, I don't recall Shannon being there, but maybe she was. So I walked out, and then Bruce, as always, being a prankster or a jokester, walked up, he looks at me, he recognizes me, I walk towards him, he says, Robert, don't ever tell anybody you're my brother. You're so skinny, you put me to shame. I know where he was coming from. He was joking with me, but it's okay, I understand. I was only 108 pounds then. So anyway, I remember Bruce drove me home, and then Linda was entertaining my mother in the kitchen or living room, and then Bruce said, hey, come on into my study, I got something to show you. So he took me into his study, and then he took out his nunchakus. At that point, I didn't know what they were. He said, hey, watch me, okay? So I go, I mean, on the screen, exactly what he can do, right? He does all that stuff. I say, whoa. And then he says, now watch. He holds one of the handles of the nunchuck, hold on my hand, and then he sort of knocked it on my little bone there. And I was kind of skinny then. I was 180 pounds. I go, feel this. I said, gee, it hurts, Yeah. He said, oh yeah, this thing is flying like a few hundred miles an hour. Hits you, it's gonna break your bone. I said, oh yeah, that's cool, So at that point, he said, okay, he said, why don't we go back outside and see what's going on? I said, okay. So of course, I was like closest to the exit of that room. So he said, well, go ahead. So I turned around, started walking. All of a sudden, Bruce said, hey, Robert. I turned around, boom! I see this big black nunchuck flying right in my head, real quick, pop! And it hit me. I thought I was going to die, at that point. And then Bruce broke up laughing. He said, look it's just a pair of foam nunchakus. Gotcha! Scared the heck out of me, man. And then the next morning, actually no, the night before that, the night that I arrived, he was asking, he said, Robert, would you like to go jogging with me the next morning? At that point, I didn't know what jogging was. And I said, what do you mean by jogging? Because as most people know, I mean, I am not really a sports person. Never did like sports at that point. I said, well, explain to me, what is jogging? He said, well, jogging is, it's a hard lung exercise. He said, you just do, a real slow pace running, and it's good for you. I figured, well, second day after arrived, nothing else better to do. I said, okay, I'll go with you, I'm game. Next morning, wakes up, it was about 7 o'clock when we departed the house. And in Bel Air, where he was staying then, there were no sidewalks. It was like running, I mean, really by the curb there. And I didn't know, I mean, like, he was right. I mean, he wasn't lying. He was just jogging slowly. At first, he was just starting off at a sort of fast walking pace because he knew, I mean, you know, I never trained before. So we started walking and it got faster and then faster. And then he started to jog. And I started to follow. At first, you know, for the first 5 minutes, I said, hey, this is kind of fun. Next 5 minutes came by. I was huffing and puffing because we were jogging uphill. Then by the time it was like 15 minutes into the jog, I could barely keep up with him anymore, even though he was going real slow. So finally, at that sort of that crest, that first hill, that crest there, I said, Bruce, I was yelling because he was way ahead of me. I said, Bruce, slow down, slow down. He said, what? He said, I can't run anymore. My legs are starting to feel like butter, and you know I'm all out of breath. He said, okay. He said, you know, there was sort of a log on the roadside, you know. So I said, can you mind if I sit down? So he sat down, and then we started shooting the breeze a little bit, you know. And then in less than 5 minutes, he said, okay, enough of talking. Let's get on with it. I said, Bruce, how long are we going to be doing this for? He said, oh, you know, I get to jog all the way down and up that way. And then he was pointing like really far away. I said, no, I can't make it. He said, yes, you can. You will make it. He said, follow me. So he started running. I mean, like another 3 minutes into the jog, I gave up, man. I was just standing there. I was sitting right by the curb there, waiting and waiting. And then another 25 minutes later, Bruce comes back. He was running. He said, where were you? I said, I couldn't keep up with you. So he said, okay, now this time, he said, now we're going downhill now, okay? He said, let's run. I said, do we have to? I said, my legs were really shaking at that point. I mean, he said, yeah, you'll be fine. Believe me, you'll be fine. So he said, I'm going to take off ahead of you, okay? So just follow me. And he was going like real quick. And I was already like, you know, 15 minutes away. I mean, jogging 15 minutes, that's quite a distance already. I mean, even though we were jogging. So I tried to keep up. And I kept up, and I tried to, I mean, halfway through the 7 minutes into the 15-minute thing, I could barely breathe. I was really so much out of breath, and my legs felt like they didn't belong to me, you know. So finally, I made it home. And I remember when I got home, first thing I did, I went into the bathroom, and I threw up because my body couldn't handle it. So the next morning, he said, want to do it again? I said, no, thanks. You do it. I ain't doing it no more, man. That's it. As I was staying with him longer, I noticed that the way he was practicing, his martial arts, he was really getting into it. And there was like a direction that he was following. And at that point, I couldn't tell, what he was trying to do, but he was so intense. The way he trained, the way he was reading his books and watching the Ali tapes, you can tell that he's trying to be on top of things and be ahead of a lot of people, or ahead of everybody if he could, which he did at the end. He accomplished that. But the thing is, his intensity was so really intense, lack of a better word. And I remember, because when I first got there, that in '69, it was still summer vacation. I didn't have to go anywhere. So, and there wasn't much better things to do at that point because all my friends were in Hong Kong and didn't have many friends in the United States. So when their friends came, my students came over, they would work out and I would be watching, I would go outside. And sometimes Bruce would say, oh, because he would work out with his students, but then all of a sudden he'd say, Robert, come over. Now, Robert, do this dance or throw this punch or whatever. And he would like to show his students, what he's worked out. And that's, how I really sort of got started with him in JKD. Even though I'm not really a JKD or, I don't consider myself a martial artist, but still, like it or not, unconsciously, I did learn a lot from him, just because of that. Bruce was the kind of a teacher that he would like to have you realize your own advantages and your own disadvantages in a way that he's very good at spotting people's weaknesses. Okay, physically and mentally also, for that fact. the thing is that, I mean, physically, I mean, all of us, you know, some are faster with the left hand, left foot, right hand, right foot, who knows? Some people have faster reflexes than others. Anyway, but he would like to show you and make you realize what your own capabilities are, your limitations also, and then try to better yourself, you know, at that. He will not throw techniques at you and say, hey, this has to be done this way. The punch has to be this way. No. A punch could be anything. As long as you can interact with your opponent and make sure you can be on top of that opponent and win. That's the main thing. So I think he keeps saying, you know, it's the end that counts. It's not the means to an end. You know. I remember in 1973, before Bruce passed away in July, he came back in May to do a couple of checkups. And after the UCLA checkup, he came by to our apartment. I was staying with my mom then, and he looked skinny then. He looked a little tired, but, you know, I think at that point he already got his results, or part of them. He said, hey, you know what? The doctors tell me I got a body of an 18-year-old, you know. I say, wow, I'm impressed, you know, because he was in great shape. So, yeah, and at that point he was even showing me this latest invention, like a combination 3-in-1 kick that was so fast, so powerful. Wow, he was something else. If Bruce was still alive today, now let's not count to it, I mean, this thing with his age, you know. Let's say Bruce was static at 32. And knowing Bruce, I mean, he will never have stopped recreating himself constantly, okay? And by doing that, even though we have new type of movies, action movies nowadays, I'm very sure he would have transformed them differently. He would incorporate martial arts differently than what we see nowadays with new weapons, you know. Who knows? He may be even using a computer as a weapon. You know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head now, knowing his creativity. I mean, I'm sure we'll be seeing something totally different than what we are seeing today. Bruce Lee as the legend, as the man, Bruce Lee was a phenomenal person, still is a phenomenal person, and I know his spirit will live on, and his spirit will constantly enhance people's creativity. I've seen some already, people's feelings towards life. He's got that knack whereby, even without him being here, his force, his spirit, can still influence a lot of people. And that's what really amazes me.